Hey everybody. All right, so we're going to get into this video on pricing, and in particular we're going to jump back into the 5 C's of pricing. There are videos on each of these 5 C's. This video is pretty short. I'm going to talk a little bit about competition. We want to look at how many competitors we have and how the market is shared among the competitors that are there. That's ultimately one of the pressure points here when we think about pricing our product. If there are very few competitors and we have loyal customers, then we can price our product with more flexibility. But if we have a lot of competition and market share is fairly fragmented among all of us, then I've got a lot less flexibility when it comes to my pricing strategy. All right, so let's just talk a little bit about just pricing and competition just for a second. So unless you're the only option for customers, then your customer will compare your value proposition to that of your competition. So it's not like we live in a vacuum. It's not like we just can produce our good and everyone will love it. People who are giving up their hard-earned dollars will they'll really be careful about, are there better options out there at better prices, and I'm going to shop around. That's what they'll do. So if all purchase criteria are equal, customers will simply choose the lowest prices that are available, the lowest priced option that's out there. So in other words, if our benefits and features of my product are the same as my competitors, customers are going to gravitate to whoever's the least expensive, and that is just reality. You can't get your feelings hurt just because somebody doesn't buy your product. If your product's the same as everybody else's, why would they buy your product, especially if you're priced higher, right? If your price is higher, as a result, then we have to justify our increased price by convincing the customer we have better features and benefits. So, it's okay to price higher, but you have to be able to justify that. So you have to have a good communication plan. You have to be very persuasive, and you have to convince that the customer should buy your product because your features are better or superior in some certain way. You can choose to lower your price. So this is kind of this idea that I can keep my price high, or I can lower my price, which I know because of elasticity ideas. I know I'll lower my price. I'm going to increase my unit sales. I'm going to demand. However, if I do that, I have to account for the cost of a lower profit margin. So in other words, I could raise my price, and I could lower my price. I could have more sales come in, but I could make less money. I could ultimately make less money by lowering my price if I don't take into account my smaller profit margin. Okay, so that's, you kind of want to think about this, kind of as we're moving forward and as we're thinking about the reasons why we're changing our price, and don't get caught up in this idea that just because my competition lowers their price, I should also lower mine. Keep in mind that every change I make, a competitor will react. And likewise, when a competitor makes a change, I'm going to react too. So this is actually kind of an area that's studied a lot in economics. It's called game theory. So if two companies engage in pricing strategies, they'll go back and forth and they'll change and alter their strategy and their price based on the reaction of their competitor. It's like a game. It's a game of probabilities is how it plays out in economics. But game theory is the study of understanding how these things happen. So just bear that in mind. If we move forward, I'm going to go through a couple different ideas when it comes to competition. And there's going to be less price competition and fewer firms when we're dealing with monopolies. So monopolies are where one firm controls the marketplace Oftentimes, markets are controlled or regulated that are viewed as monopolies. However, there are times when a company comes out with a brand new product where they behave like a monopolist because nobody else can copy them yet. So there's no other competition. So they behave like a monopolist when a very new product comes into the marketplace. So there's very few firms, obviously, and very little competition. There are other opportunities, though, where there might be more competition, but you still have a lot of control over price. And one would be something called monopolistic competition. Now, this is a special case, and the best example that I've come up with is this idea where you're a leader in your product, but there are lots of other substitutes out there that could cause you issues. There's a lot of other competition. So the way I think about this is, let's say you live in a town or a city or a suburb where you run a restaurant, and let's say you run a, you name it, it's a Italian restaurant. Well, there are lots of restaurants out there, right? But you may be the only Italian restaurant in your area. There are sandwich restaurants, there's Greek restaurants, there are Mexican restaurants, there are hamburger places, there are all kinds of pizza places, but a true Italian restaurant, you're the only one. So you're like a monopolist in that type of cuisine among a whole bunch of other cuisines that are there. That's when you're that's monopolistic competition. And you can behave a little bit like a monopolist because you can price within your product space kind of really however you want. But keep in mind, if I'm choosing to eat out, there are lots of other options. I might go with a different type of cuisine. If I really want to go eat out Italian though tonight, I got to go to your place. So that's the idea of monopolistic competition. On the other side of things, there's more price competition when you have direct competitors. So the other forms of competition, oligopolies, oligopolistic, I know it's a tongue twister, but an oligopoly is when you have usually 3, 4, 5 chief competitors, and you share a lot of market share with just them. You're going to be forced into a lot of pricing comparisons. So you could go to restaurant A, B, C, or D. They're all very similar to each other, and we're going to focus on our competition among them. Extending that, pure competition is when we have many firms and market share is heavily fragmented. Again, I don't have very much control over my pricing strategy when I'm in either of these two situations, in an oligopoly or pure competition. In an oligopoly, a good example would be cell phone service. There's Verizon and T-Mobile and AT&T and maybe one or two others, but there aren't very many, right? You're not talking like hundreds of options here. You're talking about 4 or 5 or something like that of really big players. So they have to fight on price every day to get somebody's business. And so all of their advertisements, all of their pleas are primarily based on price and coverage, but primarily price. And in pure competition, it's even worse because this is a case where there are lots and lots of competitors who all basically offer the same thing. The only difference between your version and somebody else's version is probably price. The product is probably the same. We're just splitting hairs on price at this point. So you have almost no price latitude in that situation. You have to sort of offer the price that everybody else offers or try to discount it a little bit. And in those cases, both of those cases, it really comes down to your internal costs that allow you to make money. Because if you can't change your price, your profit margin doesn't change. If you have to maintain a price but you can lower your costs, then your profit margins go up, right? So that's really kind of the key there to think about. And it's your costs that matter in those types of pricing environments. All right, so intensity of competition, we'll talk a little bit about this. Mentioned this idea of a monopoly. Everybody has this sort of everybody is the, you're the market share. Suppose 4 firms share market in an oligopoly, and then pure competition. It's this idea where very, very small market share is held by lots and lots of competitors. Those are kind of the ideas behind these. The last point here I do want you to know is this idea of what we call a concentration ratio. So there's metrics and there are measures behind measuring how intensive a market space is when it comes to competition. And one is called a concentration ratio, and it's the concentration of market share among the top leaders in your product category. So a 4-firm competition or concentration ratio is when you take the 4 competitors, 4 leaders in market share, and average their market share. And whatever that number is tells you how much of the market is concentrated among those leaders. If it's very low, then it's more pure competition. If it's very high, it's more of an oligopoly or even a monopoly. Okay, so the higher it is, the more concentrated the market is, and the more regulated it'll be. The lower it is, the more of a free-for-all it is among lots of competitors. All right, so what are the 4 different types of competition and their environments, and be able to describe this idea of market concentration and the concentration ratio in terms of market share. All right, so this is fairly short, it's fairly quick, just an idea about what markets are all about, and then that's it. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.